This is our final lecture on nicotine addiction. We're going to talk about drugs for smoking cessation, and that will lead us naturally into a discussion of harm reduction. Since the late 90s, bupropion, previously used and still used as an antidepressant, has been used to help subjects stop smoking. Bupropion inhibits dopamine and norepinephrine transporters. It also inhibits nicotinic receptors, and there's a question about whether that aspect helps people to stop smoking. Bupropion may be particularly well suited for smoking cessation in patients who are depressed, and this is how Dr. Linda Ferry first started using bupropion a couple of decades ago. More recently, varenicline has been introduced and used as a drug for smoking cessation. It is probably the most successful drug for smoking cessation. It is a partial agonist at alpha-4 beta-2 nicotinic receptors, and it came into use because early data with the nicotine patch for smoking cessation seemed to indicate that if an antagonist were mixed with the agonist, the results were a bit better. This is X-ray crystal structure of a protein that's a model for alpha-4 beta-2 receptors, not the receptors themselves. Here is varenicline binding, pretty much like nicotine, at the interface between the alpha-4 and the beta-2 subunit. Now, varenicline, while very useful, is also limited because of the fact that it causes side effects in some patients. The most frequent side effect is nausea, and this limits the dose of varenicline. The nausea might be caused either by actions on several other nicotinic receptors, or by the fact that varenicline is also a full agonist at serotonin 5-HT3 receptors. In terms of what the success of varenicline tells us about mechanisms of nicotine addiction, I should point out that varenicline does upregulate alpha-4 beta-2 nicotinic receptors in rodents, pretty much the same way that nicotine upregulates receptors. And varenicline needs to be used for a couple of weeks while a person is transitioning from smoking to varenicline to nothing, and it may be that varenicline is able to decrease that upregulation gradually as the varenicline is tapered off. We need more data. Varenicline is less than 50% successful for long-term smoking cessation. It's more successful than bupropion, but we still need better drugs for smoking cessation. And so researchers have been developing vaccines against nicotine. These are introduced in animals so far by injection or by expression from viruses. The binding constant of vaccines against nicotine is in the range of 10 to 60 nanomolar. The blood concentrations of those antibodies are in the range of 150 to 1300 nanomolar. So that means that the antibody is going to be able to bind a lot of the nicotine in the blood as long as the antibody itself is not saturated. And indeed, the data suggests that vaccines do sequester roughly 50% of the nicotine in the blood, and therefore reduce the concentration of nicotine reaching the brain. It is unknown whether vaccines are going to be successful, but clearly the treatments that we have now leave the majority of smokers still smoking a year out from the beginning of the therapy. And so we turn to the topic of helping people who can't quit. Now, the Royal College of Physicians in the UK has, in my book, a little gold star next to it. And that's because in 1962, the Royal College of Physicians issued a report on smoking and health that said, smoking is bad for you, don't do it. 2 years before the U.S. Surgeon General issued a report giving similar recommendations. And so the Royal College of Physicians has been in the forefront of tobacco control for many years. In 2007, the Tobacco Advisory Group of the Royal College issued a report, and here are some paragraphs from that report. The first paragraph says smokers smoke predominantly for nicotine. We believe that. It also says nicotine itself is not especially hazardous, and that if nicotine could be provided in a form that's acceptable and effective as a cigarette substitute, millions of lives could be saved. And those are people who can't quit using nicotine. So the Royal College of Physicians did not say and did not give any medical advice, nor am I in a position to give medical advice. I am presuming that the Royal College of Physicians exempted from this statement some exceptions based on the fact that nicotine has marked effects on development. Therefore, presumably, the Royal College of Physicians was not talking about maintained nicotine use by pregnant women, by children, or by adolescents. You can read the entire text of the Royal College report right here at this URL. So here we have a statement about harm reduction, allowing people to get nicotine if they cannot quit smoking. The question arises, what are those alternative sources of nicotine? There is a fair amount of discussion now about snus. Snus as a possibly harmless alternative source of nicotine. Snus is powdered tobacco leaves, sometimes called snuff. But snus has been pasteurized, therefore it does have fewer tobacco-specific nitrosamines, which are thought to cause cancer. Snus is the most popular form of tobacco consumption in Sweden. And recent data agree with previous data suggesting that snus causes much less oral cancer and lung cancer than smoking. So snus, here we have the relative ratio of cases of cancer. Snus seems to cause no additional oral cancer or lung cancer over what would be expected if a subject did not use tobacco. But there does seem to be a significant increase in the rate of pancreatic cancer caused by snus. And this agrees with a couple of other somewhat less complete studies that pancreatic cancer may be an issue with snus. So, are there other ways of getting nicotine that might be less harmful? Well, e-cigarettes are a possibility. We simply do not know whether e-cigarettes, electronic cigarettes, are less harmful or harmful at all because the data have not been compiled and because e-cigarettes are not now regulated. The US FDA has a Center for Tobacco Products, and people in that center would also like to regulate e-cigarettes. So we'll have to see whether that comes about. But the general question then about harm reduction by long-term maintenance in nicotine addiction is certainly a policy question, sometimes informed by scientific facts. One asks these questions. How much less harmful is nicotine itself than smoked or smoke-cured tobacco? Is it a factor of 10 less harmful, a factor of 100 less harmful, of 1,000? Does it matter, once we have these numbers stated, how much less harmful is nicotine? how much less harmful nicotine is than smoking. Is nicotine a gateway drug leading to other drug dependence? In this course and in the present literature, we really cannot yet answer this question. Nearly all nicotine for pharmaceutical use is extracted and purified from tobacco. And so the growers and possibly the companies who have been selling tobacco for years may be the people who supply nicotine for pharmaceutical use. How much does this matter? Some people consider that nicotine for long-term maintenance, that is for the rest of one's life, is a form of maintaining addiction. How much does this matter? And finally, should government insurance plans pay for long-term nicotine maintenance? These are questions that can be sometimes informed by scientific facts, but really transcend those facts. Well, we have reached the end of our discussion of nicotine dependence. I give you continued greetings of the season from myself and from the course staff, and we'll pick up again in a couple of weeks.